The air in the chamber was thick with tension as Kessler watched the dragons rush toward the massive weapon. The low hum of the energy cannon filled the room, its power building, threatening to unleash destruction on an unimaginable scale. The HFY commander stood, sneering, as the two soldiers flanked him, their eyes locked on Kessler. He could feel the weight of their gaze, their readiness for battle. But Kessler wasn't afraid. He wasn't going to let these creatures, these invaders, destroy everything. He gripped his blaster tighter and stepped forward. Blocking their path, "You won't stop us," the HFY commander hissed, its voice full of cold certainty. "I'll stop you," Kessler muttered under his breath, his voice steady, his resolve hardening. He fired first, the blast of his blaster cutting through the air, hitting one of the soldiers square in the chest. The soldier dropped to the ground, but the other soldier and the commander were already in motion. The commander raised a weapon that glowed with an eerie light, pointing it directly at Kessler. Kessler dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast. His heart raced, but he kept his focus. He couldn't afford to miss a shot now. The other soldier rushed forward, its claws reaching for him. But Kessler was faster. He fired again, this time taking down the soldier with a well-placed shot. The commander snarled, clearly frustrated. "You can't win, human," it growled, charging toward Kessler with terrifying speed. But Kessler was ready. He sidestepped the commander's attack and rolled to his feet, firing a quick blast to the commander's side. The shot was perfect, and the commander staggered back, its armor smoking from the impact. It growled in pain but didn't back down. Kessler's eyes flicked toward the dragons, who were now deep within the core of the weapon. He could see them working together, their claws and wings moving with precision as they worked to disable the machine from the inside. The red-scaled dragon glanced back at Kessler, her eyes burning with determination. "We're almost there," she called. "You have to hold them off a little longer." Kessler's pulse quickened as he returned his attention to the commander. "I'll buy you as much time as I can," he called back, his voice full of determination. The HFY commander lunged forward again, but this time Kessler was prepared. He sidestepped just in time and aimed for the weak spot in the commander's armor. The blast hit, and the commander roared in agony, stumbling back. Kessler didn't waste a second. He fired again, this time hitting the commander's leg. The commander fell to its knees, its weapon dropping to the ground. Kessler moved quickly, stepping forward to stand over the fallen commander. "It's over," he said, his voice cold, unwavering. The commander glared up at him, its glowing eyes burning with fury. "You may stop me," it hissed, "but the weapon will still fire. You cannot stop the inevitable." Kessler raised his blaster, aiming directly at the commander's head. "You're wrong," he said. "I've fought for humanity, for everything we stand for, and I'll never let monsters like you win." He fired, the blaster shot ringing through the room, and the commander fell silent, its body crumpling to the ground. Kessler exhaled deeply, relief flooding through him. But it wasn't over yet. The weapon was still active, and the dragons needed his help. He turned to look at the dragons, who were now near the core of the weapon. The red-scaled dragon turned to him, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We've disabled the outer systems, but there's a core overload. It will explode if we don't shut it down completely. We need your help." Kessler's heart skipped a beat. He ran toward them, pushing aside any doubts. "What do I need to do?" The golden-scaled dragon looked at him. "We need someone to manually disconnect the power core. The systems are too complex for us to disable from here. You'll have to get inside the chamber and pull the core plug. We'll cover you." Kessler nodded without hesitation. He had always been a soldier, trained to handle the toughest situations. But this was different. It was a race against time, a race to save the galaxy from annihilation. The chamber was hot now, the energy humming louder as the weapon charged. Sweat dripped down Kessler's face as he sprinted toward the center of the room, where a large metallic device pulsed with deadly energy. It was the core. If he didn't stop it, it would destroy everything. The red-scaled dragon moved beside him, her eyes glowing. "We'll protect you. Go, now." Kessler didn't wait for another second. He rushed forward, sliding under a low metal beam to reach the core. His hands shook as he examined the device. There were several wires leading to the power source, each one connected to a different system. Kessler carefully scanned the wires, then found the one he needed to disconnect. Cover him? The red-scaled dragon shouted, and Kessler heard the sounds of battle erupt behind him. The other dragons were holding off whatever soldiers remained. Kessler worked quickly, pulling the first wire free. The hum of the chamber grew louder, the energy threatening to burst, but he didn't stop. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind focused solely on the task at hand. He disconnected another wire, and then another, until finally, he reached the core plug. His fingers trembled as he pulled it free. The entire chamber shook, the energy building to a breaking point. Kessler pulled himself back, making sure to clear the blast zone. For a moment, it felt like the universe was holding its breath. Then, with a deafening noise, the energy surged outward. Kessler closed his eyes, bracing for impact. But instead of an explosion, the weapon began to power down. The humming noise stopped. The deadly glow faded. The weapon was neutralized. The dragons, exhausted but victorious, gathered around him. The red-scaled dragon turned to Kessler, her eyes filled with pride. "We did it. We stopped them." Kessler breathed a deep sigh of relief, sinking to his knees. The fight was over. The HFY were defeated, their weapon dismantled, and the galaxy was safe for now. But as he looked at the dragons around him, he knew this was just the beginning. He had found a new family in them, his children, his allies. Together, they had faced the impossible, and together, they had won. Looking up at the stars through the now empty sky, Kessler knew that humanity would always face new challenges, but they would face them together with courage, with strength, and with hope. And this time, they wouldn't be alone. The tunnels were narrow, their walls lined with strange, glowing symbols that seemed to pulse with energy. The deeper Kessler and the dragons ventured into the heart of the HFY base, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of metal and something else, something cold and alien. Kessler's senses were on high alert. Every muscle in his body tensed as he followed the dragons deeper into the complex. The 4 dragons moved silently, their wings folded tightly against their bodies to avoid making noise. Their eyes glowed softly, guiding them through the pitch-black tunnels. Kessler, though far slower than they were, kept pace, his hand resting lightly on his blaster. His eyes never left the path ahead, scanning for any signs of movement. The HFY were known for their stealth, and Kessler had no intention of walking into an ambush. As they continued down the twisting corridors, the walls began to change. The crude stone that had lined the outer tunnels gave way to smooth, metallic surfaces. The temperature dropped, and Kessler could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. This was no ordinary military base. This was something far worse. "We're getting close," the golden-scaled dragon whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can feel it." Kessler nodded, his breath steady but shallow. They had reached the heart of the base, the place where whatever the HFY were building lay hidden. His mind raced with possibilities. What kind of weapon could threaten entire planets? And why did the HFY need to hide it so carefully? The red-scaled dragon, always the most eager, led the group ahead, her wings flicking nervously. "I can hear them. HFY soldiers. We need to be quick." Kessler nodded again, signaling for them to halt. He crouched low, listening. There were voices in the distance, slow, guttural sounds that Kessler couldn't quite understand. The HFY must have been communicating with each other, their voices echoing off the walls. They were getting closer, but the tunnel they were in now was a dead end. There was no way out. "We'll have to fight our way through," Kessler muttered, scanning his surroundings. The narrow corridor gave them little room to maneuver, but the dragons were nimble. They could handle the tight spaces better than he could. The silver-scaled dragon, the quietest of the 4, nodded. "We're ready. We've faced worse before." The dragon's words gave Kessler a strange sense of calm. They were ready, yes, but he couldn't help the nagging feeling in his gut. They were walking into something much bigger than any of them could have anticipated. Suddenly, the red-scaled dragon's ears perked up. Her eyes went wide. "They're coming." Without warning, the ground beneath them rumbled, and the walls shook. A loud roar echoed from the tunnel ahead. Something large was moving toward them, fast. Kessler barely had time to react before the first HRA soldier appeared, charging toward them with terrifying speed. The soldier was tall, its body covered in dark, armor plating, and it moved like a shadow, silent but deadly. It brandished a long, jagged blade, its eyes glowing with a sickly green light. Kessler's instincts kicked in immediately. He fired his blaster, the shot ringing out through the narrow tunnel. The blast hit the HRA soldier square in the chest, sending it crashing to the ground. But there was no time to celebrate. More soldiers were on their way. "Get ready," Kessler shouted. The dragons were already in motion. The red-scaled one leapt forward with a roar, her tail whipping through the air as she swiped at the next HRA soldier. The golden-scaled dragon followed, her claws slashing through the air as she expertly dodged the soldier's blade. The silver-scaled dragon and the green-scaled dragon fought side by side, their movements fluid and fast. Overwhelming the HRA with precision strikes, Kessler dove behind a nearby pillar, firing his blaster again as the soldiers surged forward. The tunnel was filled with the sounds of battle-clashing weapons, roars, and the sharp crack of blaster shots. Kessler's heart pounded in his chest as he worked to keep the soldiers at bay. But the dragons were taking care of most of the fighting. They were fast, agile, and far stronger than the HRA soldiers had anticipated. But as the last of the HRA soldiers fell to the ground, Kessler's relief was short-lived. The ground beneath them shook again, more violently this time, and a deep, mechanical hum filled the air. Something was powering up. The weapon. Kessler shouted, his eyes widening in realization. "They're activating it." The red-scaled dragon yelled, "We have to stop it." Kessler barked now. The dragons darted forward, leading Kessler down another corridor, their eyes glowing bright with determination. The noise grew louder, the hum vibrating through Kessler's bones. They rounded a corner and stopped dead in their tracks. Ahead of them was the source of the sound, an enormous chamber filled with strange machinery. The walls were lined with rows of metallic pipes and cables, all leading to a central structure. In the middle of the chamber, there stood a large, pulsating device, glowing with an unnatural energy. It hummed, its power building with each passing second. Kessler's heart raced as he realized what they were looking at. The HRA had built a weapon, a massive energy cannon that could wipe out entire planets. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The energy it was generating was enough to level an entire city. "We need to shut it down," Kessler said urgently, "now." But as they approached the weapon, a cold voice echoed from the shadows behind them. "Too late." Kessler spun around, his blaster raised, but he was too late. HRA commander, cloaked in dark armor, stepped into the light, flanked by two more soldiers. The commander's eyes were cold, calculating. "You're too late, human," the commander said, its voice laced with malice. "The weapon is already primed. It will fire in minutes." Kessler's mind raced. They couldn't let it fire. If they didn't stop it now, the HRA would destroy everything. "You can't stop it," the commander sneered. "The weapon is beyond your understanding." Kessler's fingers tightened around the blaster. He wasn't going to let this creature, this monster, destroy everything. He glanced at the dragons, who were already preparing for another fight. They would take care of the soldiers. He had to deal with the commander. But just as he was about to charge, the red-scaled dragon spoke. "Not if we stop it from the inside," she said, her voice full of determination. Kessler's eyes widened in understanding. The dragons could do it. They could disable the weapon from within. But it would be dangerous. "Are you sure?" he asked. The dragon nodded. "We're the only ones who can do it. We'll take care of it." Kessler hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Do it. I'll hold them off." The dragons rushed forward, moving with incredible speed toward the weapon. Kessler turned his attention to the commander, his blaster raised. The fight wasn't over, and it was up to them to win it. The air was thick with tension as Kessler and the four dragon children made their way toward the base they had learned about. The sun had long set, leaving only the cold glow of distant stars to light their path. The cold breeze carried the weight of uncertainty, but Kessler knew there was no turning back now. The galaxy was at risk, and his long-forgotten role as a soldier was about to be reignited. The dragons moved with ease beside him, their large wings folding neatly against their backs as they walked. Their steps were light but purposeful, their eyes sharp and watchful. They were far more than the children they appeared to be. Kessler had witnessed that strength, that fire in their eyes. These were not just dragons, they were warriors. So, how exactly are we going to get into this HFY base? Kessler asked, his voice low, his mind already working through the plan. The golden-scaled dragon, who had remained quiet most of the journey, spoke up. We've been tracking them for months. We know where their weak spots are. Their base is on the planet Vrata, an isolated world far from any major galactic routes. The HFY use stealth ships to avoid detection, but they can't hide everything, Kessler nodded. Thinking, so they're hiding, trying to stay out of sight. That means they don't want anyone to know what they're up to. What are they hiding? The silver-scaled dragon, who had been more reserved, answered with a seriousness that surprised Kessler. We think they're building a weapon, something that could destroy entire planets. They've already taken over some small colonies, draining resources and leaving nothing but destruction behind. Kessler's mind raced. A weapon capable of wiping out whole planets? It sounded like something straight out of a nightmare. He couldn't let that happen. Not again. Not after everything humanity had fought for during the war. If they have a weapon like that, we need to stop them before they can use it, Kessler said firmly. We'll need to gather intel on their movements and plan our attack carefully. The red-scaled dragon, always the most vocal of the four, spoke again. We've already scouted the area. The base is heavily guarded, but there are access tunnels leading to their main compound. We can get in without being detected, but it will be dangerous. The HFY have soldiers everywhere. Kessler's eyes narrowed. He wasn't afraid of danger, not after everything he had faced in his life. But these were children, powerful children, yes, but still children. He had to protect them, no matter what. He glanced at the dragons, seeing their determination in their glowing eyes. All right, Kessler said. We'll infiltrate the base through the tunnels. We'll get in, find out what they're planning, and stop them. But we need to move fast. The longer we wait, the more chances they have to use that weapon. With that, they set off again, the stars above them lighting their way. The journey to Vrata was long, and the atmosphere grew colder as they neared the planet. Kessler could feel the weight of the task ahead pressing down on him. This wasn't just another mission. This was about saving the galaxy, stopping a new threat before it could grow too powerful. As they approached Vrata's orbit, Kessler couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. It reminded him of the days before the war, when missions like this were routine. The adrenaline, the uncertainty, it all came rushing back. But now, there was something different. Now, he had these dragons to protect. They had come to him for help, and he wouldn't let them down. The golden-scaled dragon's voice interrupted his thoughts. The base is located on the far side of the planet, near a mountain range. It's hidden beneath the surface, but we've pinpointed the exact location. We can land in the valley and make our way to the entrance. Kessler nodded. Good, let's keep it quiet. We don't want to attract attention before we're inside. The dragons, though young, nodded with a maturity beyond their years. They had grown up in a world where survival was a constant battle, and they had learned the ways of war from their mother. They weren't just innocent children, they were soldiers in their own right. As the ship descended toward the planet, Kessler could feel the tension in the air. This was it, the calm before the storm. He looked at the dragons, each one of them ready for whatever lay ahead. They were his responsibility now. The ship touched down softly on the rocky ground of Vrata, and Kessler didn't waste any time. They exited the ship and immediately began making their way toward the mountain range, where the entrance to the HFY base was hidden. The terrain was rugged, the rocky landscape offering little cover. But the dragons moved swiftly, their senses keen. As they led Kessler toward the entrance, he kept his hand on the blaster at his side, eyes scanning their surroundings. He wasn't used to being the one who had to be careful. He had always been the one giving the orders, the one leading the charge. But now, with the dragons at his side, it felt different. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a father, a protector. After what felt like hours of trekking through the harsh landscape, they finally reached the entrance. The hidden tunnels leading to the base were disguised behind a series of massive rock formations. The dragons approached cautiously, their wings folding tightly to their bodies to avoid drawing attention. Kessler followed closely behind, his footsteps silent on the rocky ground. The tunnels were dark and narrow, but the dragons seemed to know exactly where they were going. They moved through the tunnels with ease, their glowing eyes lighting the way. As they reached the inner sanctum of the base, Kessler could feel the presence of the HFY soldiers around them. They had to be careful now. One wrong move, one slip-up, and the entire mission would be compromised. The red-scaled dragon turned to Kessler and whispered, "We're close. The weapon is just ahead." Kessler nodded. "Stay close. We get in, find the weapon, and disable it. We can't let them use it." The dragons all nodded in unison, their eyes filled with determination. They had come this far and they weren't about to stop now. But as they moved deeper into the heart of the base, Kessler's gut twisted with unease. There was something wrong. The air was thick with tension, and he could feel it in his bones. This wasn't going to be easy. The storm was coming, and they were ready to face it. Kessler stood there, his heart pounding, as the 4 dragon children circled around him. Their eyes were filled with innocence, but there was a strength in their gaze, one that spoke of the fierce battles they had witnessed. They weren't the playful, innocent creatures they seemed at first glance. No, these were warriors. The red-scaled dragon spoke again, breaking the silence. "Mama said you'd protect us. She said you were the best." Kessler swallowed hard, his throat dry. He hadn't been the best in years. He had grown old, tired, and broken after the war. He had let go of everything: his rank, his weapons, and his sense of purpose. He had convinced himself that the galaxy was better off without him. But these children had come looking for him. It wasn't just an accidental meeting. They needed him. He looked at them, trying to process everything. "What happened to your mother? Why isn't she with you?" he asked, his voice rough. The silver-scaled dragon, the quietest of the 4, stepped forward. Its voice was soft, but there was an undeniable seriousness in it. "Mama is fighting. She's protecting the galaxy from something bad. Something really bad." The dragon's eyes shimmered with the weight of its words. "Fighting who?" Kessler asked, his mind racing. The golden dragon spoke next, its voice filled with urgency. "There's a new enemy, a terrible one. They call themselves the HFY. They're like nothing we've ever faced before. They're not just warriors, they use something unnatural." Kessler's eyes narrowed. The HFY. He had heard whispers about them, rumors of an enemy that could invade worlds without anyone noticing. He had assumed it was just another story spun by the ever-growing fears of the galaxy. But hearing it from the dragons made it real. The HFY were real, and they were coming. Kessler's thoughts flashed back to the war he had fought, in a war that had nearly destroyed humanity. He had witnessed firsthand what it was like to lose everything, to see entire colonies burned to the ground by invaders with no mercy. He had fought hard to protect humanity, but there had been too many losses. Now, the galaxy was finally at peace, or so he thought. But peace had a price. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "So, your mother is fighting these HFY. What do you want me to do?" The red dragon looked up at him, its large eyes full of hope. "You're the best fighter, the best strategist. Mama said you would know what to do. She said you were the one who could save us all." Kessler felt a pang in his chest. He hadn't thought of himself as a hero in years. He had turned his back on the things that made him great, and he had convinced himself that the galaxy no longer needed soldiers like him. But now, standing in front of him, were 4 creatures that needed him more than ever. He glanced up at the sky, where the stars were beginning to twinkle faintly. "How do you know she'll come back?" he asked quietly. The golden dragon stepped closer, its wings fluttering nervously. "Mama promised. She said she would be back soon. She just needed to make sure the HFY didn't reach our people. She's the last of the Drakari, the last of her kind. If she falls, the whole galaxy might fall with her." Kessler's heart clenched. He remembered Tessara well, her strength, her fire. She had been a leader, a warrior, and a friend. He had admired her, but he had never imagined she would carry such a burden alone. "Where is she now?" Kessler asked, his voice more urgent. "She's on the front lines." The silver-scaled dragon replied softly, "Fighting the HFY. We were supposed to be with her, but she sent us here first. She said you could help us stop them." Kessler stood still, processing everything. The Drakari, the powerful dragon race, had once been the allies of humanity in a war that nearly wiped out both species. But Tessera's people had disappeared after the war ended. He thought they were gone for good, yet here they were, standing before him, asking for his help. He ran a hand through his graying hair, looking down at the dragons. They had clearly been through something unimaginable. They were young, but their eyes told a different story. They had seen things no child should have seen. But now, they had come to him for help. Kessler knew what he had to do. He could no longer hide from the past. The galaxy was in danger, and he couldn't sit back and let others fight for its future. He had fought before, and he would fight again, for the sake of these four children and for Tessera. He turned to the dragons, his face set with determination. "All right, I'll help you, but we need a plan. We need to know exactly what the HFY are after, and how we can stop them." The red-scaled dragon, the one that had spoken the most, nodded eagerly. "We've been tracking them. We know their movements. They've set up bases on several planets. They're infiltrating colonies, causing chaos. We need to stop them before they can do any more damage." Kessler thought for a moment, his military training kicking in. "We'll need to gather intel. We need to know what kind of technology they're using and how they're getting past defenses. If we can find their weaknesses, we can strike back." The golden dragon spoke up again, its voice filled with resolve. "We've already started. We've gathered information on their main base. We can lead you to it." Kessler nodded. "Then let's move. We can't waste any more time." He turned toward his home, where his old equipment was still stored in the back. The weapons he had once used in the war were gathering dust, but they were still functional. He had trained with them for years, and he knew they would serve him well again. The dragons followed him inside, their eyes wide as they marveled at the human technology. Kessler quickly gathered what he needed: his old blaster, a few combat knives, and some spare ammunition. He had trained soldiers, commanded entire battalions, but now he was the one preparing for a fight. As he stepped back outside, the four dragons waited for him, ready to follow him wherever he led. Their mother might be out there, fighting alone, but with these four by his side, Kessler knew that he wasn't alone anymore. The galaxy might be vast, and the enemy might be powerful, but they had something the HFY didn't each other, and together they would fight. Together they would protect the galaxy. Adrian Kessler sat on the small porch of his home, staring out at the dusty horizon. The sun had long set, casting a reddish glow across the quiet colony. But he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. His once proud shoulders had slumped with age, and the battles of his past echoed in his mind like a broken record. His hands, once steady in the heat of war, now trembled ever so slightly as he gripped the warm mug of coffee in his hands. The galaxy had changed since the war. The constant struggle, the endless fighting for survival, had given way to a slow, reluctant peace. He'd been part of that war, one of humanity's most decorated soldiers. Now, he was nothing but a ghost, drifting in the wake of a life that seemed to slip away with every passing year. He'd been living in this small, forgotten colony for nearly a decade. It wasn't much, just a humble little settlement on the edge of human space. But it was quiet, and for a man who had seen too much, quiet was all he ever wanted. But today was different. Kessler's attention shifted when he heard the faint hum of engines in the distance. He'd spent enough years on military outposts to recognize the sound of a ship entering the atmosphere, but this was no ordinary ship. The noise grew louder, rattling the windows in their frames, vibrating the very earth beneath him. His first instinct was to reach for his blaster, but something inside him told him not to. Something told him this wasn't a normal threat. He stood, his old bones creaking as he moved toward the edge of his porch. He squinted into the dimming sky. That's when he saw them dot at first. He thought they were shadows, figures darting across the sky. But as they descended closer, Kessler's heart nearly stopped. For figures, glowing with strange light, were flying down from above. They had wings large, majestic wings and tails that swept gracefully behind them as they landed one by one. They weren't human. They weren't even like anything he had ever seen before. They looked like dragons, massive, scaled creatures, with eyes that burned with intelligence. Their scales shimmered in hues of green, gold, and silver. Their wings were large enough to block out the fading sun, yet they moved with an almost playful grace. Each of them had the appearance of youth, but their presence was anything but childish. Kessler's breath caught in his chest as the creatures landed gently on the ground. They approached him slowly, their large eyes never leaving him. "Are you?" Kessler started to speak, but his words caught in his throat. One of the dragons stepped forward, a small creature with shimmering red scales that glowed faintly in the low light. It had a kind, almost innocent look in its eyes as it spoke. "Mama's sorry we're late." Kessler blinked, unsure if he had heard right. "What did you just say?" The dragon tilted its head slightly, as if confused. Then it repeated itself, "Mama's sorry we're late." Kessler's world seemed to stop. He stumbled back a step, his heart racing. He recognized the voice the way it spoke. It was familiar. Too familiar. His mind spun. But the memories came flooding back in a rush. He fought beside creatures like these, creatures from a race known as the Drakari. The Drakari were ancient, wise beings, dragons in every sense of the word, who had once allied with humanity in a war against a ruthless alien species. They had been formidable allies, but after the war, the Drakari had vanished. At least, that's what Kessler had thought. His hand reached out, trembling as he instinctively looked to the others. The remaining 3 dragons were equally impressive, though they were all slightly smaller than the one who had spoken. One had shimmering green scales, another was a golden color, and the last one had deep silver scales. Their wings fluttered lightly in the evening breeze, and their eyes glowed with an almost otherworldly wisdom. Kessler's heart thudded in his chest. He stared at the dragons, his mind reeling. Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The red-scaled dragon stepped forward again. "We're your kids," it said, its voice soft and warm. "Mama said you would recognize us." Kessler's knees nearly buckled beneath him. Kids? He had no children, at least. That's what he thought. He had lost everything in the war. His family, his friends, everything. There was no one left. But these dragons, these creatures, they were telling him something he couldn't quite comprehend. The smallest one, the red-scaled dragon, tilted its head to the side and gave Kessler a small, almost nervous smile. "Mama told us that you would be waiting for us," it said again. "We came as fast as we could." The reality of the situation began to settle on Kessler. He had fought beside the Drakari against impossible odds, and he remembered the bond they had shared, especially the bond with their leader, Tessara, a powerful Drakari who had helped him win the war. She had been a fierce ally, and at times, something more. Kessler had loved her, though he never had the chance to tell her before everything had ended. His mind began to spin. The dragons, his children? How was that even possible? He had never been told anything about this. Had Tessara and he? One of the other dragons, the golden one, stepped forward. "Mama told us about you," it said in a soft voice. "She said we should find you. She's still out there, fighting the bad guys. But she told us to come to you, to tell you she'll be back soon." Kessler's throat tightened. Tessara was alive. Somehow, she was alive, and she had sent these creatures, his children, to find him. He swallowed hard, his mind struggling to make sense of it all. But one thing was clear now. His life was no longer just about surviving the past. It was about the future and about these 4 young dragons who had come to find him. Adrian Kessler had been a forgotten hero. But now, it seemed that the galaxy had a new mission for him, and it involved the creatures who had just landed on his doorstep. And he wasn't about to let them down.